The Architect of Lies. Welcome back to Kalen After Midnight. In some places, charm isn't a personality trait, it's a shield. A carefully constructed wall designed to keep the truth from getting out. We're often told that in small towns everyone knows everyone, but sometimes what everyone knows is just the agreed upon lie. This is a story about the man everyone loved, the secret I couldn't unsee, and the quiet realization that you can't save people who are in love with the person who's robbing them. It's about the cost of knowing the truth when everyone else has invested in the performance. Everyone believed him. It was just easier that way. In a small town where everyone's business is public property, he was the only one who seemed to have a clean history. The golden boy. He was the reliable neighbor who remembered your trash day, the man who held the door open and actually waited for you to walk through it. He had a way of speaking, low, measured, and warm, that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. In a place like ours, that kind of careful, curated presence wasn't just a trait, it was currency. And he was the richest man in the county. I was the only one who didn't buy in. It wasn't because I was cynical or because I had some sixth sense about his evil. It was simpler than that. I was the one who saw him when the stage lights went dark. We worked together for 3 years in a building that smelled like industrial carpet, stale coffee, and unspoken office politics. Same floor, same thin drywall partitions. My desk was positioned just so that I could see the reflection in his office window. I didn't mean to watch him, but after a while, you can't help but notice the patterns of a man who is performing for an audience of one. I learned the rhythm of his moves not by his words, but by the inanimate objects around him. If a phone call didn't go his way, he wouldn't yell or curse. He'd set the receiver down with a quiet, controlled force that made the pens on his desk rattle. He'd sit there for a moment, his jaw tight enough to snap, his eyes going flat and cold like a shark's. It was terrifying in its quietness. Then a second later, a knock would come at his door. In a heartbeat, the mask was back on. The jaw relaxed, the eyes twinkled. He'd look up and give that famous cricket smile. "Come on in," he'd say, his voice like silk. "I was just thinking about you." I watched that performance every single day. I watched him manipulate the older women in the office with practiced compliments and the younger guys with mentorship that was really just grooming. He knew exactly what everyone needed to hear to build a fortress of loyalty around himself. The first time I tried to point it out was at a Friday happy hour. Everyone was 2 drinks in and singing his praises. I mentioned a project where he'd taken credit for a subordinate's excellent work, a woman who had ironically been moved to another department after she complained about him. The table went silent. My supervisor gave me a look that was half pity, half warning. "You're always so analytical," she said, reaching over to pat my hand, patronizing me with kindness. He probably just forgot to mention her. "You know how busy he is. You shouldn't be so quick to think the worst of people." That's what they do in a small town like ours. They don't call you a liar. They call you sensitive. They gaslight you with kindness until you start to wonder if your own eyes are broken. So I just stopped talking. I went into survival mode. I stopped challenging the narrative and started documenting it. I watched as he systematically pushed out anyone who threatened his carefully built world. I watched as he lost files that contained evidence of his mistakes. I watched him ruin reputations with a well-placed sigh and a concerned comment about someone's work ethic. He didn't use a knife. He used whispers and plausible deniability. And I watched myself shrink. I started staying late, just so I wouldn't have to walk to the parking lot at the same time as him. I started keeping my head down, avoiding the reflection in the glass, terrified that my anger would show. I was living in a town where people were enchanted by a ghost story, and I was the only one who knew the house was actually on fire. The breaking point happened on a Tuesday in November. The sky was the color of a bruise, and a cold rain was lashing against the windows. I stayed late to finish a report, and I was leaving. I noticed a light on in his office. I knew he was already at a charity dinner. I walked in to turn the light off, that's all. But there, sitting in the center of his desk, was a blue accordion file. It was open. He was usually so meticulous, so careful to hide his tracks, but he must have been in a rush. Or maybe after 3 years of being untouchable, he'd just gotten arrogant. I saw the diverted funds. I saw the forged signatures on land deeds. I saw the list of investors who were really just elderly neighbors he'd talked into handing over their life savings for safe ventures that didn't exist. He wasn't just a jerk. He was a predator who had been eating this town from the inside out while they cheered for him. My heart hammered against my ribs. I had the smoking gun. I could take this to the sheriff. I could call the local paper. I could be the one to finally tear the mask off. But as I stood there in the quiet office, listening to the hum of the heater, I realized something terrifying. The sheriff played golf with him every Sunday. The editor of the paper was the man who called me too sensitive at the Christmas party. The entire town's identity was wrapped up in the idea that he was a saint. If I spoke up, they wouldn't turn on him. They'd turn on me. They would protect the lie to protect their own comfort. They would rather believe I was a thief or a liar than admit that they had been fooled by a con man for a decade. I didn't take the folder. I didn't take a photo. I just closed it, put the paperweight back exactly where it was, and walked out. I went home, packed a single suitcase, and left the rest. I didn't call in my resignation. I didn't leave a note for my neighbors. I just drove until the radio stations changed and the names on the road signs were unfamiliar. They eventually made up a story about why I left. They said I had a nervous breakdown. They said I couldn't handle the pressure. He probably sighed and said he wished he could have helped me more. Let them have their story. I moved to a city where nobody knows my name and nobody cares about my currency. I have a job where the walls are thick and the windows don't have reflections. I don't stay awake at night waiting for the town to burn down anymore. Because I learned the hardest lesson of all. You can't save people who are in love with the person who's robbing them. And you don't owe anyone your life just to prove you were right. I don't have the town's respect. I don't have a plaque with my name on it. But I have something he will never have. No matter how many people believe his lies, I have the truth. And for the rest of my life, I have peace.